So the Israelites plundered the Egyptians. Interesting. God provided, because as we're going to see, what happens in the desert, we need a lot of provisions. The Israelites journeyed from Ramses to Succoth and so forth. There were about, and how many men would you imagine? There were about 600,000 men. That doesn't count the children and the women. Many other people went up with them. There were a lot of unhappy people in Egypt, as well as large droves of livestock, both flocks and herds. Now, what the scholars say is that it was between 2 and 3 million people moving out in the Exodus. Can you imagine that? 2 or 3 million people. Okay, let's take a look at the map. And would someone in the back turn out the lights here? We're going to look at a map for a little bit. Shauna, can you help us with the projector? Thank you. Maybe, can you see your way over there? It's kind of dark, isn't it? You're fast on the lights. Thank you. Well, this is a book about the wandering. And I can't, not best vision here, but basically what happened was, here we are. This is Ramses. This is where Moses was. This is where all the Hebrews were. And they come out of here, 2 to 3 million strong, and they come down like this. By the way, this is my radio antenna. I've always found it to be the best pointer, because when I shoot up little red things, I can't follow them half the time. But so they come down here, and Pharaoh says, they don't know where they're going. They're lost. So I'm going to send out my hundreds and hundreds of chariots, and we're going to just destroy them. But instead, they go up to the sea up in here, where the delta is, the Mediterranean. It's not the Red Sea. The Red Sea is way down here, by the way. But this is the Reedy Sea. This is where all the archaeologists point us to. And they get up here, and this is where the sea closes in on the Egyptians and destroys them. Then they come down this way. And here's where they want to go. There is a nice road, the sea road, right into Canaan, the Promised Land. But you know what? God doesn't want that. God knows that these 2 to 3 million slaves are totally disorganized. They need time to get their act together. And he brings them down here to Mount Sinai Peninsula, and then they're there. It took 3 months to get here. We're talking 446 BC is when the Exodus occurred. They come from here. We're going to spend 11 months with them there. They get prepared. We're talking about preparation a lot. We come up this way. It's about 150 to 200 miles up to Kadesh. Kadesh is important. You're going to hear about Kadesh tonight. They do this. We're not sure exactly how much time they took, but Deuteronomy says that if you were on your own, you can do this 150 miles, 200 miles to Kadesh from Mount Sinai. It's kind of remarkable, in 11 days. There's a road, a trail that goes here. Now, if you've got 2 million people, it's much more difficult. They get up here, and you see some little arrows going up here. Something happens here at Kadesh. And we'll talk about that. But then they go from there, and this is a watermark, because God says, you know what? You have unbelief. You're going to have to wander 40 more years. And so instead of just going right in here, which is only 30 miles away, they spend 40 years wandering. They come back to Kadesh in about 37 years, and then we eventually take them over here across from Jericho, the Moabite plains. And that's where the book of Numbers ends. And we can turn the lights back on, and Shauna, that projector can go off now. Thank you. So go ahead and turn them all. That's great. So we've got all this geography. Now, last week we handed out an assignment. And there are extra copies up there if anybody would like an extra copy. And what we're going to do is give you a snapshot, 5 snapshots of this journey I've just described that took 40 years. Because we start in Numbers in Mount Sinai, we move out with 3,300 350 men over the age of 20 able to fight, plus women, children, the other that make up the 2 to 3 million. After 40 years, we end up across from Jericho on the banks of the Jordan with 601,355, I think it is. Almost the exact same number. But you know, of all that 600,000 people, only 2 of the original 600,000 get to go into the Promised Land. Isn't that amazing? Only 2. And we're going to explain why that happened. But this book then, so we've got, you know, we're in Numbers. And the next book of the Torah is Deuteronomy. And you know what? In Deuteronomy, the whole book is right there where we left them in Numbers. They sit on the banks of the Jordan. And it's not till you get to the book of Joshua that they move into Canaan. So you get to listen and hear about the book of action tonight. What I want to do as we move into this journey, this snapshot, I want you to think of a couple images. First of all, I want you to think of, you know, God leads, God guides those who follow him. God guides those who follow him. We're going to see how people don't want to follow him. And you know what? If you don't follow him, God can't guide you. Imagine holding a candle, a leader in the darkness like we just had, a candle overhead. And you walk, that leader walks the candle, and it puts out this circle of light around this leader. And you, this light, if you choose, you can be in that circle of light. You have to choose to be in it. And if you want to keep up with the leader, you have to keep pace with the leader so you continue to be within that circle of light. You know, love and grace, someone said, it's something that we can't take credit for getting it, but we can be judged for not accepting it. We can't take credit for getting it, but we can be judged for not accepting it. And we're going to see how that works in Numbers. All right. I want to move on to kind of a quick, you know, Numbers, the book itself is interesting because the Numbers, you know, what is this Numbers? You know, if you read the first chapter, and we were talking a little bit about the chapter, you know, it's like you say, this is not the kind of book I'm going to take to the beach. This is not the kind of book that I'm going to read, you know, by the fire some cozy night. Numbers, you know, it's like this is a book on logarithms or basic math, or is it, you know, if I'm not into math, am I going to find it boring and dull? Is it, you know, it's not a trick title because it does have numbers and it does have lists. There's lists of tribes and lists of men and lists of offerings and lists of formations of march and all these kinds of things. But that's about a third of it. And it's the first third for the most part, chapters 1 through 10. What we've got is, we started in chapter 11, we're into this narrative, this wonderful narrative that picks up the Exodus. And what you find in Numbers, you know, one other thing that helps us understand Numbers is, you know, the Greek for numbers was arithmoi. That's how they translated it in the Pentateuch. Arithmoi, the base root for arithmetic. When it got to the Latin, they translated numeri. And so King James's guys, they translate it, well, numeri, it must be numbers. Well, the Hebrews, I think this is really informative. The Hebrews, what they did was they said, let's look at the book. And if you look at verse 1, Yahweh spoke to Moses. That happens 150 times in Numbers. 150 times Yahweh speaks to Moses. So the Hebrews said, that's what we're going to call it. God spoke to Moses. And then the other title that they used was the next line, which in verse 1 says, in the wilderness. Because you know what? This whole book is in the wilderness. So they said, we're going to call it In the Wilderness.